So the first shift that the Common Core asks us to make is in creating a balance between the kinds of texts that we are teaching, between informational text and literature. So is this the right shift for us?
Mm-hmm. I think it absolutely is, and I think it's an incredibly important one for students' long-term success as readers. We need to make a big investment in the early grades in students' background knowledge. We need to make a big investment in history and science and the arts so that students have been exposed to the world and then can bring that knowledge to their reading. And I think an unfortunate reality of the last few years, not just in New York State, but around the country, is that we've lost some of the attention to those content areas because we've been prioritizing reading. But the mistake there is that to be a good reader, you actually have to know some stuff about the world, right? And that's the foundation for your success as a reader. And so I'm very excited about this. I think it is going to require us to think differently about K through 5, but in ways that I think are really important.
So if I'm a K through 5 teacher, does that mean that all I have to do is be sure that my kids have an opportunity to access equal numbers of informational and literate texts? Like, if I have the same size stacks in my classroom, is that good enough?
It certainly will help. Yeah, I think one of the powerful things about the Common Core is there is this sort of this change over time in how much informational text students need to interact with. I think that's important. And so, just piling up those two stacks and trying to get the informational text stack closer to the fiction stack, that'd be a good start. But it's probably not enough. I mean, what part of what students need is coherent instruction about content, right? So they need to learn about, trees and leaves, right, in a meaningful way, so that they can then bring that knowledge to bear when they're reading. The other thing is that students need strategies for informational text. Now, in some ways, informational texts are easy because they're filled with stuff that's interesting information, and so it's in some ways self-evident how to approach it. On the other hand, when you're reading an informational text, the ability to summarize can be really challenging for students, and so that's something that's addressed, I think, in the 4th grade, right?
You're exactly right.
In the Common Core, you begin to address it in the Common Core in 4th grade. But this idea of being able to take lots of rich detail about a topic and then summarize it into key points, that's a very challenging skill in and of itself, and that's something you want to teach with informational text. So it's really about teaching through and with informational text, if you will.
What the Commissioner says is so important on 2 points, because he really emphasizes rightly something that's mentioned in the core, which is it's not just about informational text in equal balance, like an equal weight, but also the coherent development of knowledge within and across grades. There's an example for teachers in New York State can look at, which is in the Common Core, there's a page on the human body that gives a sampling of text within a grade and across grades, building, like you said, of trees and leaves, a coherent basis of knowledge around that. And the second thing you said that was really important is paying attention to the difficulties of, you said it can seem easy, but in fact, the research shows us that often informational texts are more challenging. In fact, readers like narrative structure, kind of get the hang of it, and each informational text can be new and demanding. And so I think what you said about kind of maybe summary might fully come in grade 4, and that is when the Common Core demands it, but we're cultivating that attention to detail from the beginning of reading. So what you'll find with informational text is one of the most wonderful simple indexes to have in your mind as a teacher is how much knowledge did my kid gain, did my students gain from each text? Because what you're really trying to do so they can get the most knowledge in the end is that from each text they read, they derive the maximum amount of knowledge. Was nothing lost on them, is the question you're asking. And so wonderful questions in informational text can be, what is connected here? How does this fit together? What details did you? And then gradually they can summarize and condense.
So I wonder then what you think, John, about the ways in which this shift changes the role of the elementary teacher.
Well, it certainly I think demands attention to the coherent teaching of content, right? So it does demand probably a different allocation of time in the school day. It demands a level of preparation around what are the history or social studies topics I'm going to teach, what are my goals for those units, what are the science topics I'm going to teach, what are my goals for those units. And I think it probably also invites an opportunity to think about how I might engage different students in the classroom with different texts. I think there are some folks who would say that different populations of students might get excited about informational text in different ways, and so I think that's an interesting question. There may just be students based on personality type that get excited about informational text, right? So there's an opportunity, an invitation in a sense, to add informational text to the teaching toolbox. So it's not just story time, right? There's stories, and those are valuable, but there's also this informational text time.
But I think it also creates a window for an elementary teacher to become sort of the facilitator of the world as students begin to access it, right?
I think that's right. And I think, when I think back to my own elementary school experience as a student, I can remember sort of very vivid experiences of learning about other countries in the world, learning about the properties of water, the trip to the Brooklyn Museum, and seeing the exhibits there and learning about ancient Egypt. Those are important experiences because they then inform, right, your later reading, your later engagement with the world. And so, there's a huge opportunity for elementary school teachers to be sort of a tour guide to the world, right, for students. And it supports, but the key thing is, the key message of the Common Core, I think, is being a tour guide to the world is going to help students become better readers.
Well, and being a tour guide through text also,
That's
right?
That's right.
Exactly
That's right.
right.
That's right. And trying to build, and it links to the comments that David made earlier about vocabulary, right? This is another way to build students' vocabulary there. It's a way to help them get excited about reading. I certainly can recall the experiences as a teacher or as a middle school principal, having students get interested in a particular topic, and then they want to read lots of things about that topic. Or as a parent, I see that, right? It's sort of like we're suddenly interested in bugs, and so we're going to read about ants, and then we're going to read about spiders, and then we're going to read about flies, and there's lots of things to say and interesting discoveries to make and connections between them, and how are spiders actually different from ants and flies, and all those kinds of discussions.
And what you said, Kate, when you said, but through text, and I just want to put a little exclamation point on that. In this growing world of multimedia, which is so exciting, and the core standards do invite kids to compare what they learn through text to other sources, but sometimes the tour guide can get confused and think showing a video or talking about an area or going to the trip can replace the work of learning through speaking and listening about text and reading text. And I think that the other thing for us all to keep in mind is, while we do ask for a new balance, the core standards also focus on the knowledge you gain reading literature. So they focus on the patterns of story, the kinds of myths, the kind of knowledge of myth and references you've talked so often about, Commissioner, the kind of background knowledge of stories and patterns of stories and mythological references that allow you to read and understand so much of your own life and your own work. So that sense of knowledge pervades the literature standards as well as the informational standards.
Yes.
But I think this is one of those moments where no one wanted to banish science and history from the elementary school teacher. No, it just happened to us as we extended the literacy block and overemphasized stories in that block. And so I think elementary teachers, frankly, throughout this state and throughout this country are excited at a chance to reclaim their right to teach broadly.
Nor does anyone now want to banish fiction, right?
Exactly right.
Exactly
Perfectly
right.
said.
That's right.
That's exactly right. In fact, there's, I think, a more careful attention to the core standards, based a lot on some of the very good work Massachusetts did in this area in developing their standards in early grades around really developing the kind of knowledge you gain as a young reader of the structure of stories that you can, again, just like you said of science and history knowledge, reward you in your later reading.
Yeah, because now they can intersect and speak to each
Exactly
other within the student.
Exactly.